Crypto is a tumultuous space that always seems to be in flux. Convincing your brain to navigate past the latest hype and trends to the things that actually matter can seem bewildering at times. Luckily, there's a guiding North Star in crypto. It's not Polaris, it's permissionless decentralization. Ready? Let's go. Today, Charles put out a video in which he mentioned the flavor of the week in crypto. We all know Charles is a passionate man, so it was easy to dismiss this as a derisive comment about Cardano's competitors. But if you think about it, the history of smart contract platforms in crypto has been a little bit of a laundry list of projects that saw their moment in the sun and then faded into shadowy obscurity. And the interesting thing is that they all had something in common. Anybody who was in the crypto space in the 2017 to 2018 period, like me, will have a hard time forgetting that EOS was able to raise over $4 billion in an ICO. At the time, people said it made sense. They did the whole appeal to authority thing and pointed out that Peter Thiel was a backer of the EOS project. So of course it made sense. How could it not be a fantastic project if Peter Thiel of PayPal fame was already backing it? And of course, based on all that promise, EOS rose in the ranks until it was a top 5 crypto asset. That was all great for EOS until it tumbled all the way down to rank number 35, according to this article. And coincidentally, it didn't help that in this article, they detailed research claiming that 21 accounts had pumped the EOS ICO via wash trading. But back in 2018, wash trading didn't seem to be what people were interested in talking about in regard to EOS. What people were concerned about was that it seemed EOS only had 21 block producers. 21 block producers were in charge of the blockchain. And it seemed like they could do things like lock accounts and even roll back transactions that had already occurred on the blockchain. Obviously, back in those days, we hadn't seen any of the research brought up in this recent Cointelegraph article about wash trading. But just the fear that 21 people could jump on a conference call and have such profound power over the blockchain seemed impactful. And it's not really a surprise that since that period, we've seen EOS go from something like a top 5 crypto asset to something like rank number 35. Also in 2017, we saw the ICO of Justin Sun's Tron project, which raised over $70 million. This project seemed like it was in the press every single day with claims like this one, that it had 0 transaction fees and could conduct approximately 2,000 transactions per second. Never mind the claims of plagiarism of their white paper. Tron was even able to buy BitTorrent, which seemed like an amazing deal in crypto at the time. You can see from this Investopedia article from June 2019 that Tron was jumping into the top 10 list of current cryptocurrencies by market cap, and it wasn't the first time it had been there. Today, Tron is ranked up there by EOS at number 28, and again, an intervening factor has been accusations of centralization. This article in 2019 shows the CTO of Tron leaving the project and accusing it of pseudo decentralization, saying that the top 27 nodes, block producing nodes, had an overwhelming number of votes, and most of them were controlled by Tron. But it's not just centralization of block production that could possibly have an effect on a project, no matter how big a high flyer they were in their early days. Here we see an article from 2017 about Tezos finishing what at the time was the world's largest ICO. Obviously, this is before the EOS $4 billion ICO. So Tezos raised more than $200 million in their ICO. Here you can see a Medium article by one of the founders of Tezos saying he is proud to announce that Polychain Capital has added Tezos to its hedge fund by pre-ordering Tezos tokens. He goes on to explain that Polychain itself had recently closed a $10 million round of funding led by venture capital firm Union Square Ventures with participation from A16Z. You will probably recognize those names as being involved in venture capital in the crypto space, so it may or may not come as a surprise to you that if we fast forward a couple of years, we find reports like this one from cryptoeq.io that say things like this. One of the largest crypto VC firms in the space, Polychain, was an early investor in Tezos and the ICO. However, over the course of 2020 and 2021, the firm sold its entire XTZ position, over 500,000 XTZ, that's Tezos. This served not only as a headwind to the price, but also confidence in the project overall. And by that, I think you can understand that they are probably saying that this hurt confidence in the project overall and hurt the price. I haven't done any research whatsoever to confirm or deny what was in that report, but when I do a quick Google search, it looks like some members of the Tezos community seem to agree that Polychain did some selling of its stake in Tezos, and maybe that had negative effects. Here we see a Reddit post that says, Polychain have unloaded another 400,000 XTZ since April 12th and only has 50K to go until depleted. Finally, we can see a future without this whale constantly suppressing the price of XTZ. Down below, there's a comment. No wonder every sizable move upward gets squashed like a bug. I hope they have polarized glasses for the day when Tezos' booster rockets finally engage and it blasts off to the moon. Again, I haven't researched these numbers to know if they're correct or not, or even if Polychain sold, but it definitely appears there are people posting on the internet with the perception that that indeed did take place. And again, what we see is that despite their apparently world-breaking ICO, Tezos these days, only a few years later, 4 years later, is currently ranked number 41. More recently, you'll probably remember the amazing debut of the crypto project called Internet Computer in the top 10. In the top 10 of crypto projects. It was like it came out of nowhere, just materialized in the top 10. People couldn't believe it. I was getting messages from people telling me that ICP was going to destroy Cardano. I was like, are you talking about the clown rappers? Because I don't think the clown rappers are a serious threat. No, they were talking about this project, ICP. So ICP debuted in the top 10. And as this New York Times article points out, then its value collapsed. So ICP, according to the New York Times, tanked by about 95%. I did a whole video on ICP when it was, I believe, when it was still in the top 10. And just based on my cursory review of their documents, it looked like it wasn't really, in my opinion, it wasn't really a permissionless network. It looked like it was a permission network. Like you had to get permission of some kind of, there was some kind of a mechanism to get permission to actually become a node on the network. And it looked like there were some proprietary hardware requirements. The New York Times article quotes Miguel Morel of Arkham Intelligence, a crypto analysis firm, and says, Dfinity did not follow the playbook of other successful projects. Instead, it appears they quietly allowed the treasury and insiders to send billions of dollars of ICP to exchanges while making it extremely difficult for their longtime supporters to access the tokens they were promised. Arkham identified 44 probable insider addresses that deposited 10 million ICP tokens worth more than $2 billion to exchanges after the initial coin offering, giving the impression they were transferred for trading, not safeguarding. These transfers coincided with significant drops in the price of ICP. None of that to me seemed consistent with its top 10 ranking, let alone debuting the top 10. But when I looked at who had invested in ICP, or at least in Dfinity, the organization that seemed to be behind ICP, things started to make more sense. Here's the Crunchbase profile of Dfinity, that organization that seems to be behind ICP. And if you go to the financials section and you scroll down, what you see are some familiar names. A16Z, and Polychain, among a bunch of others. We've discussed the holdings of insiders and especially VCs in some of these projects before in the context of this Masari chart. And when you look at projects like Cardano and Ethereum next to projects like ICP and Solana, you see a pretty stark difference. This red section over here corresponds to this insider section, which they describe as all team, company, and VC purchase tokens. The gray section corresponds to tokens allocated to foundations, community governed grant pools, or their incentives like testnet participation rewards. And you see there's a pretty pronounced difference between a project like Cardano and a project like Solana and a project like ICP. In fact, when we go to the Crunchbase profile for Solana and click on the financials tab, scroll down, we again see these names, A16Z and Polychain, among a bunch of others that we know are active in the crypto VC space. The funding round that this Crunchbase chart associates with A16Z and Polychain's lead investors seems to be pretty gigantic too. I mean, the chart shows an amount of 314 million. Granted, they also show 14 investors in that round, but 314 million, that's a pretty big chunk. In keeping with the ICP similarities, Solana also appears to distinguish itself in creating a high hardware threshold for nodes. This is an article at ghoststaking.com called Casper versus Solana. And in this article, they say the Sol network of 200 physically distinct nodes. You can compare that to Cardano, where we have over 2,900 stake pools last time I checked. But the Sol network of 200 physically distinct nodes are all run with GPUs, where each node requires 256 gigabytes of RAM. Commentators have repeatedly highlighted the fact that the cost to run a Solana node is much higher than in other networks. Solana's degree of decentralization is still very much up for debate. To become a validator on Solana, an individual would need to shell out thousands of dollars in hardware. This is in contrast with other blockchains. I was curious about that article's account of the Solana validator hardware requirements, so I Googled Solana nodes GPU. And it looks like this page popped up. It seems to be right in the Solana documentation. It's a table. It says Table 2 provides an example hardware configuration to support a certain TPS level with estimated off-the-shelf costs. And I think up here they say running a Solana validation client required relatively modest upfront hardware capital investment. And down here it says Table 2 example high-end hardware setup for running a Solana client. So I can't tell if there's another table somewhere that might be a more modest list of costs, but this one's pretty serious. I mean, they want you spending 2,500 or 2,800 USD, it looks like, just on the GPU. And then you got a bunch of other things that look like they add up pretty fast. So it does seem like we see this pattern. Entrants come into the crypto smart contract game, and they all claim to be doing the same thing. They all claim to be solving the crypto trilemma. That is simultaneously servicing decentralization, security, and scaling or speed. And there's this pattern where they definitely are trying to do the security thing, and they're definitely trying to do the scaling thing, high speed, high TPS, however they express it. And they give short shrift to the decentralization thing. It seems to be more than just a passing coincidence. The smart contract platforms that don't navigate by the pole star of decentralization seem to have their moment in the sun, and then it's over. Then we see this dramatic downfall. In Cardano, we don't see the same pattern. We don't see these high hardware requirements to run a node. In Cardano, you can famously run a node on a Raspberry Pi. We don't see gigantic VC investments. What we do see in Cardano is a relentless pursuit of decentralization in every way, instead of willfully trying to sacrifice it in the name of fundraising or higher TPS speeds. You and I can't necessarily have any impact on how these projects conduct themselves. But maybe we should use this North Star of decentralization as a guide in deciding what blockchains deserve our attention and energy. Talk to you tomorrow.